Chicken on a stick.
Hi, I'm Patrick.
I'm Maggie.
And we are Chicken on a Stick. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about a movie that I've now seen 4 times. If you count director's commentary, that is. But a movie I absolutely love. In 2022, it was my number 4 overall of the year, and that is Aftersun. We've decided to talk about this one as our first episode that we officially released because I had purchased the Blu-ray. So we just got that in the other day, and then we rewatched it. So just to give you a little idea of what this movie's about, Maggie's going to read us the synopsis from the back cover.
Which, by the way, is really, really cool looking. It was a really great deal. The things that came with the DVD are really neat. But at a fading vacation resort, 11-year-old Sophie, played by Frankie Corio, treasures rare time together with her loving and idealistic father, Callum, played by Paul Mescal. As a world of adolescence creeps into view, beyond her eye, Callum struggles under the weight of life outside of fatherhood. 20 years later, Sophie's tender recollections of their last holiday become a powerful and heart-rending portrait of their relationship as she tries to reconcile the father that she knew with the man that she didn't in Charlotte Wells' superb and searingly emotional debut film.
Okay, so let's just get into it.
Yeah.
I think it's nice that we share the same sky.
What do you mean?
Well, like, sometimes at playtime, I look up to the sky, and if I can see the sun, then I think about the fact that we can both see the sun, so even though we're not actually in the same place and we're not actually together, we kind of are in a way, you know? Like, we're both underneath the same sky, so kind of together.
Okay, so Aftersun. I love this movie. I did not give it a perfect score in rating, like 1 notch down, for a couple reasons. Maybe we'll talk about that down the road or whatever, but that's not really the important part of this. We're not here to necessarily review the movie. We're here to talk about the movie.
Yeah.
And I saw this movie last year alone.
Yeah, alone. I don't know why I didn't go. I don't remember why. Maybe I thought it looked boring or something.
I don't know. Sometimes she doesn't like to go see like the more artsy independent films, so I'll go alone to go see them. And all I know is as soon as I got out of that, I said it was amazing and that I think it would make her cry.
Oh yeah, as soon as you came home, you were just immediately talking about the movie. This would make you cry, and I was like, oh well, maybe I'm glad I didn't go. But now, like in retrospect, I wish I had gone to see it.
Yeah.
On the big screen.
Yeah, and as soon as I left the theater, I was instantly curious what other people were saying about this movie, if anybody was talking about it online, so I instantly looked up like YouTube and stuff to see if anyone was talking about it.
Right.
Because I don't know, I probably saw it opening weekend, but it was such a, like, it was a small release, so it wasn't something massive. I was going to say,
was there any trailers or promos for it?
Yes.
But like on the big screen?
Yes.
Then I don't remember.
I'm pretty confident that there were trailers. I would assume that's how I knew about it. Actually, I take that back. I don't know. It very well could be I'm just ingrained in the film ethos so much that somebody talked about it somewhere and I Googled if it was showing and then went and saw the movie.
That's a very fair point, actually.
But yeah, anyway, as soon as I got out of the theater, I looked up what people were talking about, and I watched one video where a guy who probably saw it at some festival was talking about the movie and like what it meant and all these things. And as I was watching it, it was, I don't know, maybe a 5-minute video breaking down like, you see this and there's these things and this bit and this is what I think this means. All I could think of is like, he's missing things.
Right.
There are things that I picked up on that this guy's not getting. And it could be, you know, it's one of those things you probably just got out of the theater, you're talking about it, so maybe you didn't catch everything.
Right.
And this movie, I do think, benefits from multiple viewings. This being
1,000,000%.
This being my 4th time overall.
Yeah.
I was still noticing small things that just enhanced the viewing experience. So we're just going to kind of go through the movie here. With all of our notes and stuff, I forced Maggie to take notes on this watching. That way she could pipe up and mention things that she liked.
I definitely do not have as many notes as you, but I mean, I will say this: A24 to me has a fantastic track record. I feel like for the most part, I love most of A24's movies. Was this like a film festival, or was it South by Southwest or something? Or
yes, it was in film festivals.
Cons.
I don't know. It says in the opening where it was.
Oh yeah,
but I don't remember.
That's true. But yeah, they've got a great track record for me. I love A24. The stuff that they produce is awesome.
Generally, I would agree. I can't say that anymore since, I don't know, 2017 or something.
Oh.
They started to disappoint me a little bit with some of the... But that's going to happen when your studio gets big. That's not what we're here to talk about.
Did they do
Hereditary?
Hereditary? Oh, that's why.
Yeah. Hot take, but I don't like that movie. Anyway. That's another episode entirely. So Aftersun, to kind of get into this, writer-director Charlotte Wells' feature debut, starring Frankie Corio as Sophie and Paul Mescal, Academy-nominated Best Actor Paul Mescal as Callum, father and daughter who are on a vacation in Turkey, and it is the final vacation they ever take together. And we're kind of along for the ride to see why that might be.
Right.
Now, the movie itself opens up with home video. One thing I really liked about this, it takes place in like the 90s. That's the aesthetic that they're going for. That's kind of what it looks like. A lot of the film, well, I say a lot, but the idea is Callum has bought a video recorder, a digital video recorder, to take on vacation to capture those memories. You know, a lot of people's parents probably did something similar, or you have all those like old photographs if you were born in like the 90s or something, not like 2010 babies where your parents just whip out their cell phone to record things.
No, we had the type of video recorder that was like hefty, like it had weight to it. Yeah, it was that big.
So a lot of this film is shot, the way that they shot it is they did shoot it on like a digital camera, but then they played it through a TV and like recorded the TV to get like the graininess look to it. So a lot of the film, there are parts that are presented as like home video stuff. Right. And what works so well with that, and what you might not notice on the very first viewing, although it does linger for a little bit, so it makes it kind of obvious, but you might forget it by the time you get to the end of the movie the first time. Right. But the film opens with home video that we'll see a little later on of Sophie asking her father, Callum, she's saying, your dance moves are embarrassing. Yeah. And she goes to interview him and asks him what he thought he would be doing when he was 11. Right. And like right as that question ends, it pauses. And we get this superimposed image on there that makes it clear that somebody is watching this video. Right. It lingers there for a second, you might not notice it, and then it kind of moves. And that sets up the framing that this is Sophie as an adult revisiting this memory of this final vacation with her father.
Which was so cool to how they did it, and it went way over my head the first time around. Like I needed that to be pointed out. Otherwise I missed it. The way that they go about certain little subtleties it really is, like you said, it's even better the more that you watch it.
Yeah. From there, we cut into what's considered what Charlotte calls the rave sequences. They're dark, flashing lights of people seemingly dancing. And when we're first seeing this, we're seeing a woman that we're not familiar with. Right. She's not the child or the father that we first see, just this woman in this rave, and there's a bunch of people dancing around. And then it cuts. And it cuts to... we actually hear a couple things in the rave, actually. There's a baby crying at one point, which will come back later if you don't realize why there's a baby there. And then we cut to another home video of Sophia saying goodbye, I love you to her father. And then it kind of goes into like this montage. Like it's the home video stuff, but it looks like everything's being rewound. Somebody's rewinding like the VHS or something, right? We're on a bus now, and we see Sophie and her father Callum together. He tells a joke that Charlotte said in the commentary was a joke that she remembered somebody telling her one time, so she fit that in there. She did also make it a point to say that Sophie is not her. This isn't a story about her life. She's a totally fictional character. She just implanted things from her memories of a vacation and other things into the story to make it feel kind of more real, more lived in sort of situation.
I really like that. I love that idea and that aspect.
Yeah.
And movie directing and being able to implement something that made an impact on you, even if it's not, the whole true story about it. It's really cool to be able to have those little references that you can, pop in there. Like, why wouldn't you?
Right. We also get a shot. This is something small, too, that is pretty meaningless in the kind of grand scheme where you can kind of look into more of it, I guess, if you want to. But while they're on the bus, there's a shot of sort of the landscape passing them by. And while they're going on their trip, like they're arriving, the landscape is scrolling past you from left to right. That comes back later on when they're leaving. It's the reverse, and now the landscape's scrolling right to left as they're coming and going sort of situation. Something small, but a little fun sort of attention to detail type thing, or you can probably read into it more of this is like the arrival of this traumatic moment and then the leaving of the traumatic moment. Whatever you want to look into it, really.
That's clever.
So we get... Basically, they arrive at this hotel. There's nobody to greet them at reception. Callum goes off to find somebody so they can get their room. A little fun thing that Charlotte pointed out in the commentary is there's a book that Sophie looks at real quick, and it's an adult book. They don't do any more with it throughout the story, but originally she was supposed to take it, and it pops up later on or something, but they didn't. That would have been kind of funny to me, I think. That would have been really funny. Especially since this story deals with a lot of her experiencing more adulty type things, like adolescent type stuff going on, I guess. So they get up into their room, and Sophie basically passes out on the bed because it's late. Callum calls the front desk to complain that their room only has one bed, but he paid for two.
Right, twin beds.
And that's a big deal. It's definitely focused on in this moment that he paid for something and he didn't receive it. So that's your first little nugget of... Well, it means nothing the first time you watch it.
Right.
When you know Callum's story and who he is, it means a lot more now. So it's planting the seed that's going to bloom as we're kind of going through this.
I think that actually, the first note that I wrote down was that the beginning is very captivating. As far as movies go, sometimes it does take a little while for you to get sucked into it. But when I did watch it, when you got me to watch it, I immediately was pulled in by the beginning, just by the way that it was shot, the color scheme, the feel, the vibe, all of it immediately pulled me in. And I was like, oh, I think I'm going to like this.
Yeah, and I guess it's not technically one of the very first shots, because I really like what they did with the digital video and like rewinding things and stuff, the way they kind of tell the story. But this shot in the bedroom here, while Sophie's asleep, Callum turns off the lights and he's going out to the balcony, but the camera pans down to Sophie sleeping and we see her in shadow, so she's basically covered. It's kind of just this black form that we're seeing, and Callum's in the background out of focus, and then the camera lingers for a minute and then pans up to Callum to bring him into focus, just past Sophie's body, and we see Callum, and he's starting to smoke outside and he's starting to dance a little bit, and this is another subtle little thing that, again, on first viewing you're not going to pick this up, but I wrote down, realizing at this time too, that every time we see him smoking or dancing in the movie is, with the exception of once, which we'll get to, seems to be an indication of when he is kind of spiraling
right.
a little bit, because he's not smoking around Sophie
you never
or anything. He just made that call about paying for something that he's not getting,
right.
which is a hint towards money issues that are going to get brought up. He starts to smoke, and he starts to dance by himself out on the balcony.
Yeah.
And these are things we only see him do when he's in a dark place, right. basically, or he's going to a dark place. So that's also this little small thing that means nothing in the moment, but means everything later on.
Have you ever had a moment where you were just like, my day has gone so terrible that you're just like, well, screw it. I'm just going to dance. I'm just going to dance.
I don't dance, so I can't say that I've ever had a moment where I just go, fuck it. Boogie.
It. This day sucks so bad. I'm just going to start dancing.
That's so funny. The great thing, the end to that scene is the camera pans from him back down to Sophie, and we hear her snoring a little bit, and then it transitions from her sleeping to Callum,
right,
in the morning, and it's her looking at Callum. And we're gonna get a couple shots like this throughout the movie where they're kind of zoomed in, focused on his face, and Charlotte talks about in the commentary that these are POV shots. They're meant to be point of view shots,
right,
from Sophie's perspective of her. And again, we're talking about the full movie here, so obviously spoilers if you didn't catch that part already.
Right. There's
watch the movie if you haven't watched it. If you made it this far, well, we spoiled the first 20 minutes and then some for you. But these point of view shots are, the way she put it, is trying to remember a face or somebody's hands or nose or something from just your memory. So these shots that are kind of close up of Callum from Sophie's perspective are, we realize, are adult Sophie sort of remembering her father as he was that day, or what she saw of him that day. And there's some, these, again, they're small, pretty sparse, so they don't happen a lot, but they're in there for a moment, and it's something, again, you would not recognize that it's supposed to be a point of view shot, and then I listened to the commentary and it's like, holy shit, that's makes so a lot of sense. Yeah.
I love her vision, like, of how she's making these things come to life. You know, I know a lot of people get into movies because they like the art of storytelling, but, you know, to be able to bring your vision to life in such subtle, teeny tiny little ways must feel so fantastic. That must be so satisfying.
Yeah, Charlotte made it clear through the commentary that while she's the writer-director, there was a lot of input from the cinematographer, some editors and stuff to kind of make things really work and gel. And they ran into some issues during the shoot. They were in Turkey. There were forest fires or wildfires going on at the time, so they had to evacuate the hotel at one point. And then other times they ran into issues with shooting on the day. They ran out of time to do things, so they had to move it to another day. Frankie, because of how young she is, she could only shoot until a certain time in the day, and then she'd have to leave. So there are times where she wasn't even on set, and they still had to shoot things with Paul.
Which, by the way, was very refreshing. When you told me that, I found that to be very refreshing, coming from hearing about people like Judy Garland and these other child actors that are like literally worked 80 hours and they're forcing them on uppers and downers and stuff. Like, good for them for not making her work, late at night. She's just a kid.
Yeah.
Good. That's how it should be.
It is kind of funny because Charlotte mentioned specifically she had to sit in to read Sophie's lines to Paul.
Yeah.
And she was just like, it's amazing his talent, because even though I was there and I'm not even reading the lines well, he just gave a fantastic performance and didn't even skip a beat. Didn't seem like he was talking to anybody else. It worked perfectly.
Good for him.
So we get to the next day, and they're down by a pool, putting on some sunscreen, talking a little bit. Callum asks Sophie, how are things at home? This is where we learn that Callum and Sophie's mother are separated. It's never really... They don't seem to have ever been married either, because that gets brought up later in a conversation I do want to mention a little bit about. But Sophie says things are going fine. Last time they spoke, she said she wasn't getting along with her mother, but now things have gotten better. So probably your standard, typical mother-daughter relationship. as Maggie just nods her head. She doesn't want to agree with anything.
I also shout out to children of divorce.
Yeah.
We gotta stick together.
Wow. One thing I picked up on this scene that I didn't get before either is there's a very quick line where Sophie, she's reading the user manual to the video.
Oh, yeah.
She reads like digital video entertainment or something, and Callum says, "Be careful, Sophie, that's really expensive.
Right.
Like, don't drop it in the water, it's really expensive." Again, another little, he's got money issues because he's so worried about these things, which of course back then that thing probably was pretty damn expensive.
They were so expensive. Like I could text my dad right now and be like, "How much did you spend on that Yamaha?" I don't know if Yamaha does.
Yamaha?
They do pianos. I could ask him like, "How much was that?" And he'd be like, "It was a lot."
Yeah.
And that's why you kids weren't allowed to touch it.
Yeah, that sounds about right. The first digital video footage we actually get from like as far as chronologically is Callum videoing Sophie playing in the pool, like jumping onto a floaty in the pool, swimming around, sort of fun, lighthearted stuff.
Yeah.
Nothing that bad. We get this scene shortly after again that's also, again, digital film stuff, and it's of Callum and Sophie walking about going to get ice cream, and Callum says she's got a big head, and she's like, "You got a big head too." Great thing about this scene, it's small, doesn't really mean much of anything other than building like their cute little relationship that they have. But that scene was completely improvised, and Paul himself recorded it.
Yeah.
Paul, Frankie, and Charlotte were out for a walk to do just some like B-roll footage, I think is kind of what she was saying. They were just trying to find some places to like film some small stuff, and Paul just happened to be filming, and he was just having this conversation with Frankie, not necessarily in character. I don't think she really makes it clear if it was in character or not, but he just captured this like cute moment between the two of them, and it worked so perfectly.
It's so charming and wholesome, and just they're one of those people that just have natural chemistry together, and you don't always see that with that kind of age gap. So it was really, really cool to see this moment that they were just hanging out, and they were just like being silly and fun together, and you're like, oh, they naturally work.
Right.
If I saw them walking down the street, I would think that was his kid.
Yeah.
You know, just the way that they have fun together.
Yeah. The relationship, Frankie Corio, I said this as soon as the first time I saw this, I told you this. She is amazing in this movie. It's her first role ever.
She's so good.
And she's so natural. And Charlotte, even in the commentary, was just singing her praises, being like, she's so naturally talented and timing of things. There are certain moments throughout the movie where she wasn't instructed to do certain things.
Right.
She just, like, waited and let it linger and then said the line, or randomly did something herself. It just felt so natural and normal. Frankie Corio is amazing in this movie. She absolutely crushes the role. I wouldn't even say it's an easy role. There's a lot of like face acting to kind of convey how you're feeling without actually saying saying how you're feeling. And then there's like subtler, it's just a really subtle performance by somebody who's never done it professionally before, and it's brilliant. And I love her. She's cute. Everything works top to bottom.
She's cute. That was my big note, was how great of an actress and how great of a job that she did, because she's an actress, but kind of like what you're saying, she's portraying these moments and these emotions that a person her age has never felt before. Like, she's doing scenes that, I mean, God forbid she ever have to, go through things that are that, kind of sad or, or hard or whatever. She does an amazing job.
Yeah.
And it is true, seeing her have the timing that she has. She's clever in a witty, dry humored way as well. And she she really, really steals the show. She does such a great job, and it just comes natural to her.
Yeah.
And that's a great gift to have, for a young actress, young actor, anybody.
Yeah, so I think she has a great career if she sticks to it.
She's got a great career ahead of her, for sure. She's going to be very well taken care of. Mm-hmm. So that was my big takeaway. It's so exciting to see young actors in Hollywood, recently. Like, it's so refreshing to see someone new come on and throw their own take into something, and you can be like, wow, I bet I'm going to see them in 6 more movies, or I don't know, some shit. But it's really, really exciting. Like, I feel like that's how everyone felt with Millie Bobby Brown, was they were like, we're watching someone's career start, and knowing that this was her first movie, she's going to be fantastic.
Yeah.
She's already got the acting chops.
Definitely. So at this point, we cut back to, it's nighttime. We're back into the hotel room. Sophie's asleep, but Callum's awake, and it's 3 a.m. Mm-hmm. He's awake all night. He can't get to sleep, and he's watching back footage from the day.
Yeah. And
it's all happy footage, so he closes it, and he lays down to try and go to sleep. It seems like he's pretty happy at that moment. Like, everything's not everything's gone to plan exactly, but Sophie's having a good time. Yeah. He's having a good time. Everything's happy. And
that's what counts.
Right. And this scene, again, is another thing that's going to matter later on, because we're going to come back to basically the same scene. Now, Charlotte did say throughout this movie, the hardest thing about it was building the arc of Callum uncovering his struggles was the hardest thing to really build on, because they're really subtle for something that's so serious that a lot of people struggle with and have problems with. So I can understand how hard that is to like build it, and Paul Mescal just does amazing. Like, he deserved to be nominated. His performance is also fantastic in this movie.
And I didn't find out until we just rewatched it. He's not Scottish.
Scottish? No, he's no.
Could have fooled me. Yeah.
I mean, that's the point, right?
I've been the victim of a theft. Our dog Max just stole my blanket that I had. Just stole it right away from me. Anyway,
that's okay.
But yeah, she's Scottish, right?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
I mean, I would guess that's probably a higher probability, but I do not actually know.
Good for him for his accent.
Yeah. So we go to the next day. Sophie's calling her mother. She is embarrassed by Callum doing these Tai Chi moves, these slow motion ninja moves, as she calls it. And then Callum talks to the mother, and it seems to be relatively friendly. Yeah. He does also say "I love you" on the phone, which is interesting.
Very good co-parenting.
We get to see Sophie is in the bathroom at one point, overhearing 2 teenage girls talk about some sexual times that they recently had with a boyfriend. Yeah. With obviously words that Sophie probably doesn't fully understand. And that's kind of your first... She kind of has this look, like kind of a longing to be part of them. Like, she's 11. She's just on the cusp of being a teenager. She's probably looking up to teenagers being like, I'm one of you, or I'm about to be you. Being a teenager is so cool, like most kids kind of feel. Yeah. So there's a lot of shots of her kind of longingly looking at these teenagers that are at this resort hotel place as well, to be like, include me. I want to. I'm one of you guys, or I want to be just like you, or whatever. When I grow up, sort of situation.
And we talked about that. It's even if you don't have, even if you didn't grow up with siblings or older siblings or whatever. I said, I think you asked me, like, did that ever happen to you? Where you
were you ever in a bathroom and some older girls were talking about stuff?
Absolutely. Every mall I ever went to when I was a teenager. But I also said, especially growing up with an older sibling, my brother was 2 years older than me, And so when junior high and high school time comes around, suddenly their friends come over and you're like, oh, they're kind of cute now. I didn't realize that they were that cute before. And yeah, it's one of those things where you want to be a teenager, or you want to be older, you want to be a part of the group. I don't know what words those mean. I don't know what their lingo means, but I just want to be involved. So I completely understood where her like longing to be, a part of the group. There are scenes in the movie where her dad's telling her, "Why don't you go play with those kids over there?" And she's like, "I don't want to play with the kids."
I think she either says they're too young or calls them babies, basically.
Yeah, she's like, "I don't want to hang out with them. I want to hang out with like the teenagers."
And the hilarious part is she says, "Well, why don't you go talk to them, to like a lady or the parents?"
Yeah.
And Callum also says, "Well, they're old.
They're old.
They're old because he's, she's 11. It's his birthday eve or birthday eve. He's about to turn 31.
Yeah.
So if she's 11 and he's 31, do the math.
Yeah.
He was very young when she was born. He was 20 or 19 technically.
Yeah, he doesn't want to go hang out with the old people.
So these parents are probably like in their 40s or something, maybe a little older, who just happen to have kids that are roughly her age.
Right.
But because of she is now feeling like she's kind of a teenager.
Yeah.
So sure, maybe they're 9. It's only 2-year difference. But, in kid years, that's like a huge thing.
Yeah,
like,
I don't want to hang out with the babies.
Yeah. And then for Callum, sort of his 20s or like his young adult age was gone to raising a kid. Yeah. So
he grew up real fast.
She views him as older than he actually is at 31 because, to her, they're just parents. Yeah. Like that, they're probably the same age. You're a parent, they're a parent. But in reality, not quite.
Very different. I thought that was a pretty good, pretty interesting way that they went about that.
Yeah. We jump to Sophie on this arcade game. There's like a bar outside of this hotel, and there's an arcade game that's like the 2 motorcycles you get on top of. Everybody's seen those at an arcade. And Sophie meets this boy, who will later learn his name is Michael. Mm-hmm. And they just have this little, like, let's play a racing game together. Yeah. And it's a little cute kind of friendship. They're basically the same age, so it's the one character similar age range that she sort of connects with, although it's very brief.
Right.
And then they go off to play pool.
Yeah.
Or billiards or whatever you want to call it. And Frankie had never played pool before.
Right.
So Charlotte talks about they had to teach her actually how to play pool just to shoot this scene, which they technically have 2 pool scenes, but I think the only time I can remember her actually like taking a shot is during this scene, and it's maybe like twice.
Yeah.
So you teach somebody entirely how to play it just for a few shots. It's kind of hilarious to do. She also just points out during the scene, while they're playing, some teenage boys come over and put down like the quarters to be like, hey, we got next.
Yeah.
And Sophie invites them to play doubles. And they're playing doubles. And these kids, they're teenagers. It's not quite clear how old they are. And I don't know necessarily what the drinking age in Turkey is, but I'm guessing...
Was it like 17, 18 maybe?
Right. So I think they're roughly around that age.
Yeah.
So while they're closer to Sophie in age, they look more or less like adults at that point, or kind of treated like adults. They seemingly can buy alcohol, it kind of looks like later on. So there's a shot where while they're playing, Sophie is off screen, and it's a shot of the 2 teenage boys and Callum. And Charlotte points out that for a very brief moment, Callum kind of views them all as equals, right? They're all kind of together. They're roughly the same height, whatever. They're all like the adults at the table, basically.
Right.
And then one of the teenagers cusses, and in that moment, you can see it on Callum's face. He looks at him and he tells him like, oh, don't worry about it. But you can see the switch. He's like laughing with them for a second, and then switch turns on parent mode.
Right.
And all of a sudden he realizes like, these aren't really my peers.
Yeah.
These are still children to me.
And didn't they also ask him if that was his sister at first?
They do. That's what it is. They ask like, oh, sorry, man, you and your sister. He goes, oh, no worries. Actually, she's my daughter.
That's my daughter.
And that's kind of a thing of like, oh, I still look young. I
Yeah.
kind of feel young until the moment where they cuss, and then his like,
that switch.
his switch hits, and all of a sudden he's like, okay, well, we're not really equals or
we're
peers.
not on the same level.
You're still actually kids compared to me, kind of
Yeah.
thing. And it's a real small, like, just subtle thing, which is kind of great. From there, we get to this really small, quick scene, which is kind of cute. And I think the scene can actually play out to mean a little bit more. While they're playing pool and while she got to use that arcade machine, these things just cost basically quarters, whatever the Turkey currency is, I'm not really sure. But they just cost some coins, so not a lot of money. We quickly get this brief shot of, like, water slides, like almost like a water park sort of situation. And we see this kid throwing a tantrum and his dad drags him off. Cute little behind the scenes thing. That's Frankie's father and brother. And apparently the brother's just...
so cute to me.
The brother's just so good at throwing a tantrum on command.
Oh, it wasn't
like
just an actual tantrum?
They didn't catch him.
I thought they caught him doing a tantrum.
He could just throw a tantrum and it'd be so funny. I just find it really hilarious that that was her father and brother.
I mean... Could you think of anything better than being a kid and someone being like, I need you to throw the biggest hissy fit you possibly can, and you're not going to get in trouble for it?
You know how embarrassing that's going to be in, like, 10 years?
He's going to be so embarrassed.
Luckily, most people probably wouldn't realize it was him.
Probably not.
But what I was saying is, so we see the water slides. We see the kid and his father, like, coming off the water slide. Kid obviously wants to go more. Father's taking him away. But Callum and Sophie are sitting at these tables just kind of observing.
Right.
And I think what you can read into that is, like, he doesn't have the money to let her go on the slide.
Yeah.
Or what we find out later is people at this hotel can get, like, all-inclusive bracelets, which would probably let her slide, but they don't have the money for that, so she doesn't have it. So they're left spectating on vacation instead of, like, enjoying the moment. And it's small, it's brief. You don't really have to look into it more like that, but that's how it reads on a watch back, is like Callum wasn't able to, like, they're spectating because he can't quite provide that for her.
And that in and of itself is already heartbreaking, because you just know, like, at least I know for me growing up, I'm sure there were times that my parents wished that they could have done something and, you know, we couldn't or something like that. So to see him being like, well, at least we can be outside and the weather's nice, and at least we can watch the people go down the slides. You know, it's heartbreaking but sweet at the same time.
Yeah.
You know that it probably just breaks his heart that he can't spend that kind of money on her.
Yeah. So we again, that's a really small scene. And we cut back to, they're in the hotel, and now he's trying to teach her, like, self-defense.
Yes.
And he's, like, grabbing her wrists and trying to teach her to, like, twist. So you're, like, swinging whoever's grabbing you's arms around, and they, like, you break free of their grasp. And it's clear that he's being, like, deadly serious about it, because he's like, Sophie, come on, take this serious.
Yeah, he's very serious
I mean it, take this serious. And to her, it feels kind of like it's sort of a game.
Like wrestling.
But he kind of snaps at her a little bit, and it's clear, like, she gets the expression of, like, okay, fine, okay, cool. And we go into the very next scene, and he's, like, cleaning her face, using some sort of, like, face care thing to wipe down her face. And he's like, look, this is serious. I want you to be able to protect yourself. And even though he's being serious and kind of being like, look, I'm sorry I kind of was snapping at you, but, like, I want you to be able to protect yourself. It still, to her, doesn't, like, she's a kid. It doesn't mean much to her, because even then she's like, well, what if they grab me anywhere that's not my wrist?
Yeah.
And he doesn't reply to it, because he's just in this feeling of, like, I'm trying to do something to protect you.
I'm trying to teach you a lesson.
Like, you're not absorbing this lesson.
That's also it also appeared to be very difficult to teach someone how to self-defense when you have a cast on your arm.
Oh yeah, he still has the cast on his arm.
So yeah, she definitely saw it more as like when you're play wrestling, at home, or, being goofy, and he's taking it very, very seriously, which if I had a daughter, I would do the same thing. I took self-defense classes in college for free.
Yeah.
You know?
So we get next, we played a clip towards the beginning of this where Sophie says she's looking up at the sky, and she's like, I like looking at the sky and thinking, no matter where I'm at, we're under the same sky, because even though we're separated, we're still kind of together. And I like that line. It's very...
I love that line.
It's pretty, like, poignant from, like, a child to think something like that. Yeah.
That's very deep for a child to come up with. I mean, that belongs on a poster or something. That's very poignant to think, no matter where we are, we're under the same sky, we're looking at the same moon, the same sun, and that's probably where she got her comfort from.
Yeah.
Whenever he was gone.
Right. So just to kind of fast forward a little bit, there is more that kind of goes on in between these. We find out, like, Sophie asked Callum about a girl he was dating. They're no longer dating because she had a boyfriend and went back to that boyfriend. So he's lost something there again. We learn more. We see Sophie longing to be, like, with the teens again later on. There's, like, they're at this dinner table and the Macarena's playing, and there's two teenagers who we do see more, and she's just kind of staring at them, kind of... She kind of watches a lot of people who are kind of having, like, these flirty relationships or kissing and stuff throughout the film, because, again, she's a preteen. She's coming to, like, adolescence to where this is, like, of interest to her.
Yeah.
So she's watching and kind of longing for
she's
these.
crossing over that threshold where suddenly, kissing's not gross looking, and, I would also like to say, I don't know why I was very impressed, but I was very impressed that you knew the Macarena.
Who didn't know the Macarena?
I don't
if you
know.
lived through the 90s, everybody knew the Macarena.
I don't know why I was surprised that you just whipped it out.
Yeah, exactly.
I had a Macarena themed party once.
I'm pretty sure I went to a Macarena party once, or at least when it was really big in, like, 96 or something.
Gross.
I swear we went to. I'm just guessing the year.
Time ago.
Yes, that was a long time ago.
There was a CD you could buy. Okay, super short tangent. There's a CD that you could buy. It was the Macarena CD, and it was literally 10 tracks. It was literally 10 tracks of just the same song, just done ever so differently.
Nope.
And we played it on repeat.
Nope.
I feel so bad for my dad.
That is awful. So anyway, we get back into the room, and we kind of get a mirror again of what we saw earlier. This time Sophie's wiping down Callum's face. And then we get a shot where, beautiful shot, they're both in separate rooms. Callum's in a bathroom. Sophie's in the bedroom of the hotel room, sitting on a chair. There's a wall, just one wall separating them. But the way it's lighted and shot feels like they're in two separate places, because Callum is taking off his cast on his own, which
terrible idea.
He probably shouldn't be doing. He ends up stabbing himself because he's doing it recklessly. But he also doesn't seem to care too much that he stabbed himself. No. And while he's doing that, and it's like a darkly lit bathroom and stuff to kind of indicate, like, his state of mind, basically.
There's, like, dark blue and...
Sophie's on the opposite wall. Warm tones and everything, and she's talking to him and sharing how she has this happy memory where she once thought, when her mother said Callum was engaged, that it meant that the two of them were going to get married, not realizing that engaged meant that he was currently busy with something.
Right.
And that made her happy. And even in this moment, just thinking about that time made her happy. And we're seeing that play out while Callum is very clearly in a dark place, and he doesn't reply to her about it. She's bringing these things up, and he just kind of sits there in silence, like, okay, sure.
He's cut himself, and so he's just sitting there letting his wound drain into a bucket.
Yeah, and he changes the topic. It kind of goes quiet for a second, then he asks her if she's reading this book he gave her, instead of replying to anything she just said.
And what's so interesting, too, in that scene, his head is down the entire scene. He's just looking at the floor, or he's looking at the wound that's bleeding. And meanwhile, on the other side of the wall, she's just in the whole moment that she's thinking about that, she's smiling and her head is tilted up and up against the wall, and she just is reveling in this memory that she has, and so happy. And it's such a contrast, aesthetically, but also, mood wise. It was such a really, really well done shot. I think it was very clever.
Agreed. The next big kind of scene is they go out scuba diving. And while they're out there, they get into the water, and Callum goes to pass Sophie goggles, scuba mask, whatever you want to call it, and she doesn't see it, and it falls into the water. And Callum goes down. We see him reaching for it, but it's just out of reach. And Charlotte compared that to basically how his life feels, how Callum portrays his life, and that he's always reaching for something, but it's just out of his grasp and he can't get it. And
that hurts my heart.
When we get back up on deck, there's a shot that I really like, is that we sit on Sophie's face for a minute, and you can tell that she wants to apologize, or she wants to say something, but she waits and waits and waits, and then eventually she apologizes to him. She feels bad. She apologizes that it was expensive because she knows that it was expensive, and that this is another indication of Callum's financial issues. But he doesn't reply or really do much. He kind of like sits there, realizing that she is aware that he has these financial things, which, I assume no parent wants to know their kid to know that they're struggling. And he just kind of sits there, and instead of comforting her in some sort of way, he just says, "It's fine. It's fine. Don't worry about it. It's fine."
She felt so bad.
Yeah.
She was trying to explain to him that she didn't hear him say that he was giving her the goggles, or she didn't see them, and you could just tell how much that was weighing on her heart.
Yeah. And then we get a nice little shot. There's a scuba instructor who comes to help Callum, and we get the scene between the two of them, and Callum and the scuba instructor are basically the same age. Obviously, they're not just like, "I'm 30. How old are you?" "I'm 30. But the way the guy's talking, he's talking about his life and his experiences, and that he was doing these things when he was younger, and now he's about to have a baby, and he thought he'd be like 40 before he had a baby. And him and Callum are basically, they're peers at this point. They're two men of roughly the same age, but they have such vastly different lives, because while he was talking about like the things he was doing when he was younger, and now he has to kind of settle down because he's about to have a kid. Callum can't relate because he had the kid when he was younger. And he even says at this point that he didn't even think he'd make it to 30. And now he is 30. So he very clearly sees that his life has been limited, like that he doesn't have, because of having Sophie. I'm sure the character wouldn't necessarily say because of her his life went this way, but in general, because he had a kid so young, he kind of feels like a lot of it was closed off to him because he couldn't be out doing things or traveling or whatever. He had to be there with the kid.
And I think that also kind of pulls back to what we talked about earlier with like the teenagers. Callum meeting the teenagers and kind of seeing that, the age difference, and wow, I really am in a different place in my life. I'm kind of wondering if he maybe had the same thought process with this scuba instructor. That like, oh wow, we are really different, but not that different, but quite different. So I like that aspect, that he's kind of being probably introduced to so many different ages of life and comparing his life to those.
We get a quick shot of Sophie recording herself at the top deck of the boat, saying that this is like the best day. She what are they called? The seahorse wrapped itself around her finger. The scuba instructor put an octopus on her head, and that she just had a great day because of Callum, and that this is like a happy memory that they're gonna have. Which contrasts completely with the conversation Callum just had, because
Yeah.
it's clear in that conversation that everything this guy just said to him is like slowly spiraling him in the opposite direction, while Sophie just, even with this thing of dropping the goggles and stuff and knowing that upset him, still had this amazing
Still had
day.
the best day, and a core memory was created, and he's just having to be there and keep inside what he has to, and it's at that point in the movie, it's so apparent that all he wants to do is make sure that she's having the best time, even if they can't afford a lot of stuff.
So we get back to the rave scene, and now we see adult Sophie actually sees Callum in the crowd dancing. Very brief. So now she's kind of getting closer to this vision of him. We get back to the day, and Callum and Sophie are just hanging out. Callum makes some flirty jokes about her teacher that she's about to have.
Oh, yeah.
Charlotte said that this was inspired by her dad actually making flirty jokes about a teacher that she had.
That's really cute.
We get to see
that hot teacher from Glasgow.
Yeah, the hot,
the hot teacher.
The pretty teacher from Glasgow.
She was telling him, he was asking like, oh, are you getting ready, or are you excited for the new semester in school? And she was like, yeah. And he asked what the new teacher's name is, and she says it, and he was like, oh, was that the hot teacher from Glasgow? Very cute.
Yeah. So we see Sophie go back to playing the arcade. Michael, the kid, comes back, actually introduces himself this time, pays for Sophie to play with him. He then says, now we're even 1-for-1. She goes, I didn't know we were keeping track. And he goes, of course you did. So it's a cute little like moment between the two of them. Then we go back to the hotel room, and this is an interesting scene. You can definitely dissect this scene much further than this, but we get to a scene where Sophie's laying on the bed. She's on the foot of the bed, on her back, with her head kind of hanging over, so she's kind of upside down, and Callum's in the bathroom brushing his teeth.
Right.
And Sophie says that she's feeling down. She kind of asks him, do you ever just... She's like, I don't know. She doesn't really know how to express it, but she's just saying, have you ever just had a day that was just like so fun and it was great and stuff, but then you come back and you're tired and you're feeling kind of down, like your bones are just tired, like you're just like it's out of you. And we cut to Callum, his face in the mirror, and he's similar to the bathroom thing when he cut off his cast. His face is kind of down. The shadows on the mirror are kind of dark, like you get the shadow from his brow over his eyes and stuff, so it looks kind of dark. You can tell he's kind of in a dark place. And you can tell for a moment he kind of wanted to be like, yes, I know what that feels like, because he almost speaks, and then he doesn't, and instead he pivots again and says, well, we're gonna have a great day, aren't we? And he spits on the mirror. You could take that plenty of different ways, like he's spitting the like, forget the depressed bullshit, we are gonna have fun. And so that's what they do. He ignores her bringing up something that's really close to him. He doesn't speak up, even though it feels like he really wants to. He almost utters something to like console her, but instead says, no, we're gonna have a good time. That's what we're here for, is a good time.
Like, could you imagine trying to explain that that's just a normal feeling that you feel, and it's okay to feel it? For your kid to try to explain to you something that they've never felt before, and you having to rationalize and let them know that that's just a thing that everybody feels, and adults feel that, and you're coming into adulthood, so now you're going to be, experiencing these new things. I can't imagine. I'm only a cat and dog mom. I already have a hard time
explaining things
to them that, I can't imagine.
It helps when they speak English.
It helps when they speak English. But I can't imagine how difficult that must be. And he, making the decision to just put everything on the back burner and just focus on the happy. That's it.
Not healthy.
Not healthy, no.
Especially not in his state of mind. That's very clear.
No.
we cut to a rug store. And in this rug store, Callum is looking at this rug that's on the floor. And he very distinctly points out... He's kind of fixated with this rug, actually. And he points out that he was told that every rug, these designs, they all have a story. They mean different things. And somehow that resonates with Callum. It's like the rug is what he wants to be. He wanted to have these cool designs and patterns to have a life that he could tell people about that was interesting. And this rug is that. These designs mean something.
They're
they have
intricate.
A story. So it kind of captivates him, and he asks the rug shop owner how much it is, and it's 850 pounds. And Sophie kind of looks knowingly that, like, that's too much.
We can't afford that.
So they leave. Sophie goes off to play again with the teenagers. They walk by, and she goes to play pool, and she's hanging out with these teenagers, and she's watching, like, these teens make out. Yeah. And there's a great line with one of them covering her eyes going, "Corrupting the youths!"
Yeah, don't look at them. It's gross. You're too young.
And while she's doing that and kind of having, like, a good time, still, there's shots of her, like, realizing she doesn't quite fit in with these older kids.
Right.
But she's, like, enjoying herself. Callum goes back to the rug shop, and he buys the rug. Yeah. And as he's, like, folding up the receipt for the 850 pounds he just spent, you can kind of read on his face that he knows that he shouldn't, but at the same time, feels like it's brought him some sort of relief as he just kind of lays on it for a moment.
Joy.
So we go back to Sophie. She's with the teens again. They all go into the pool. She pushes them in the pool. And while she's underwater, she's seeing them again being flirty, kind of kissing, hugging each other, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever kind of stuff going on, them having fun. And as she's coming out of the water, and this is taken from the commentary, Charlotte Wells points out that as Sophie comes out of the water, as her head breaks the surface, the music stops. Indicate to me, and I wrote this down in my notes, is you can tell at that moment when she comes out of the water and she starts to swim off that she realizes she doesn't belong, or she doesn't feel like she belongs. And the music stopping is supposed to be an indication that she doesn't belong, like that her feelings of being out of place is how Charlotte put it, is that's her feeling like she doesn't belong there.
Yeah, she was like the odd man out because they're all flirty with each other, and she's kind of the kid in the group. And it's also, I was really relieved about this part of the movie as well, is that all of the teenagers that she's been hanging out with have been very kind to her and protective of her. The dad, Callum felt safe enough with them that he's fine with her hanging out with them alone. So, her hanging out with them, and maybe it was a moment where she realized that she wouldn't be seen in a flirty way by any of those guys, that made her be like, yeah, this isn't my scene. This isn't the vibe for me.
Yeah.
But it's also, I mean, to quote the great Britney Spears, there's a song called "Not a Girl Yet Not a Woman," and she probably felt like she was in this weird little zone where she didn't belong with the babies, she doesn't belong with the teenagers. So, like, where does she fall?
Yeah, that's definitely. I don't know that song,
it's a
but
banger.
I wasn't sure if you were gonna say "Toxic" or "Oops, I Did It Again."
No.
I don't know where she fell on the scale for any of that. So we jump back. This is probably one of my favorite shots in the whole scene. So we cut back. The very beginning of the movie, there was a little interview scene that got cut off before somebody was rewinding the tape, and now we're getting that played out. But the way that they shot this is, we're seeing the TV that the digital video, the camera is plugged into, as Sophie's recording Callum and asking,
right.
I'm 11 and it's going to be your birthday soon. And you're turning, you're 130, but you're turning 131, in 2 days. That just kind of came out of nowhere. And then she asks, what did you think you would be doing at 11? And he shuts her down hard. And he goes, put that away. Stop recording. And she goes, I am. And he's like, it's still got the red light on. So she finally turns it off. But what I love is the shot is a static shot on the TV playing. We're seeing this play out on the
Yeah.
TV, and when she turns the camera off, we're still seeing it through the TV from reflections. So the screen is black, but we see the reflection of them sitting next to each other. And also, right next to the TV, Callum has a stack of books. One about Tai Chi, one about meditation, one is a book about poems and some other things and other writings, and then the other one is called, I looked it up because I wasn't quite sure what exactly it said, but it was called Being Aware of Being Aware. Don't know what that's about, but clearly all those books
Self-help books
are self-help things, like how to meditate, relax, change your energy, Tai Chi, whatever that's all teaches. But it's a beautiful shot scene, and it's very clear that Callum is starting to have a bad, like, his bad days are, like, it's happening. He doesn't want to talk about what he thought when he was a child, but when the camera's off, we do get a very depressing moment where she goes, "What did you do for your 11th birthday?" And Callum tells the story that nobody remembered that it was his 11th birthday, and when he brought it up to his mother, she got mad at him, and they forced him to go to a store and pick out a toy. And that is so heartbreaking. So sad. Just to, it's clearly, even his growing up, his life wasn't great. So he's been having a rough time since childhood, and it's just kind of built and built and built. So that was a depressing story.
It was really a lot of the movie is really hard to watch, but it's also really important to. I believe in, mental care and mental awareness, and I think it is a very, very good way to point at there's nothing wrong with getting self-help books. There's nothing wrong with Tai Chi. There's nothing wrong with doing yoga or whatever it is that might make you feel better. Medication, it's something that you should be able to be open with your children about and friends and family and there's nothing wrong with that. I've met people before that said if you've ever had to buy a self-help book or if you had to take medication, then you're not an adult, and that makes zero sense to me.
And it's still worth remembering that this story takes place in the 90s. There's not,
which was, nobody was talking about mental health.
Yeah, mental health wasn't talked about big back then.
Absolutely not.
And mental health for men is still a huge,
it's like a stigma.
Right.
Like you're not a man if you have anxiety or depression, or you get the saddies some days, know. It's I can only imagine how tough it would be for someone in his situation.
Right.
And he, as an actor, does a great job of portraying, making you feel what it's
clear that he's going through these things, but he's also fighting to not show the vulnerability, not just to Sophie, but to the outside world.
Right.
And slowly through the course of the movie, he's unraveling.
Right.
Because he wants to give her such a great time, but he can't provide everything that she's seeing other people do. And then she's calling him out for things, and it's just spiraling his health, mental health, kind of out the window. We get to a moment where Sophie also asks if he's ever going to move back to Scotland, or at least move back to like Edinburgh, where he's from, or roughly around where he's from. And he says no, and he says that there's kind of a feeling that once you leave the place you're from, it doesn't really feel like you belong there anymore, and that he kind of felt like he never really belonged there. This is an interesting one that I think I can, it's not like a unique thing. It's not I can uniquely speak about this, but I've been in that situation. I was born and grew up for 10 years of my life in upstate New York. Left there, came to Texas, lived here for about 10 years, and then went back to New York. And I lasted about 6 months. But to be fair, that was that 6 months was kind of leading up into right before I started going to therapy and talking to somebody, and like I was miserable. That was probably like the following years was like the worst bit of my personal depression. So there's like that kind of resonates in that like I thought maybe leaving what I saw as a mostly, I won't say completely negative, there are a lot of positives happening in Texas at the time, but leaving what for me was like an unhappy situation to go back to some place that I only remember being happy at, but I'm going back as an adult where I still have all these responsibilities and things, and it just didn't work. I left friends, a girlfriend, just multiple things that I guess you'd look as kind of like your comfort or your
familiar.
Yeah, people you can like fall back on and whatever, but didn't have that in New York, so you just spiral more or whatever. So that line specifically is interesting to me because I can be like, I won't say that I don't feel like I don't belong there, but there is something to that, like because you're not the same person.
You're not. If
you grew up somewhere as a child and then left and then you go back. He also tells Sophie at this point that she can be whatever she wants to be and that she has time, which to me is an indication that he feels like he doesn't have time. That because he had a child so young, he doesn't have the time to do or be what he wanted to be. And we hear earlier in the film that he's like this one thing didn't work out, and now he's trying to do this thing with his friend Kevin and whatever, who knows where that's going. It kind of seems like maybe he's constantly trying to do these things and they just don't go anywhere, which isn't a good thing. We go back to the rave, and we see adult Sophie getting closer to Callum in the rave. So she's, throughout the course of this, slowly getting closer and closer. And again, depending on the way you view the rave, this is kind of adult Sophie maybe becoming more familiar now as an adult, understanding better Callum and getting closer to him as she's watching this vacation back or reliving this in her mind. We go to the next day. I'm going to kind of skip what my thoughts were on this and kind of just read what Charlotte Wells said. And what she said is, we get to this day where Callum and Sophie are just they're not getting along. And it's clear. Neither of them looks particularly happy. They're kind of sitting at this table. Yeah. Callum tries to say something or tell a joke. Sophie's not really receiving it. She tries to say something. Callum's not really receiving it. So they're just not having a great day. Neither of them...
Not jiving together.
They're trying to give, but neither of them is receiving. And it just kind of gets worse from here. Callum says, let's go do something fun, and forces her to play water polo, even though she very clearly doesn't want to because she doesn't feel she's a strong enough swimmer with it. And we see that while they are playing, the adults and stuff who are playing generally ignore her. Yeah. And then we cut to that night, and we see that they're at a karaoke thing, and Sophie signed them up for karaoke. She says that it's something they've done every year. It's something they always do. But Callum now doesn't want to do it. And just from a critical aspect at this point, this is the one thing that kind of sticks out to me about this movie that I think is a little too... It works. I'm fine with it. It doesn't like ruin the movie for me or anything, but I do think some of these musical choices, specifically this karaoke moment and a moment later on, are songs that are like too on the nose. I would have preferred... I was
just about to say that.
It works, and it works well. I feel like the movie is so subtle at other times that using... And I mean, I couldn't name a song to use that'd be better, but picking something that would have been more subtle, maybe I think would have worked even better. Yeah. But Sophie goes up. She picks the REM song "Losing My Religion."
Great song.
Fantastic song.
One of my favorites.
And Callum's like, I'm not going. Yeah. No, just let him be. He'll move on to the next people. And Sophie's like, no. So Sophie kind of defiantly goes up on stage, and she thinks she can win Callum over. She starts to sing, and she's looking at him and kind of smiling and like waving to him, like, come on, join me. And it's clear that Callum is just, he's not into it. he's basically sulking is the way I put it. He takes a drink of his beer. He looks
embarrassed.
He looks unhappy. I wouldn't even say embarrassed. He just looks miserable.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't want to be there. He didn't want to be a part of it. Maybe he does feel like the spotlight might be on him a little bit to be like, well, they called 2 names. Why isn't he there?
Yeah.
And she sees this, and her face turns from sort of like playful happiness at the start of the song to just being sad about it because he's not joining her. And it's clear on her face that she's very upset about it. And obviously, this is where I'm saying the song's a little on the nose because it's Losing My Religion. Hello. So she's singing a song about losing faith. And at that point, it's faith in her father. Like I said, just seems a little on the nose for me from the critical aspect of it.
In talking again about how great of an actress she is, or how great of an actress she is, she sang that song beginning to end in the same exact tone, but throughout, like you said, throughout the song, her face went from one expression to another, and you could watch her move or navigate her way through feeling really let down, but still staying up there to sing. And then it just looked like she was just uncomfortable and she was gonna finish it.
Right.
And it's one of those situations, if your parents ever said to you, I'm not mad at you, I'm disappointed. If disappointed was a person, that was her. She was very disappointed in him kind of leaving her out on a limb like that. When she was just trying to do something cute and fun that, apparently was part of their past, fun stuff that they did.
Right.
So.
And Charlotte Wells says in the commentary that this is the scene is the crossing over from childhood into adolescence, and something that should be fun and kind of freeing. Once she's got this self-consciousness about her, you can't go back. So she becomes aware in that moment how her father's reacting to this and everything. And I just thought that was a beautiful thing in the commentary that was said. After this, she sits back down, and Callum, to try and lighten the situation, says, I can get you singing lessons if you want to be a singer. And she very quickly snaps at him and says, don't offer to buy something you can't afford.
She did not find that funny.
And he almost is taken aback, and he smiles for a second. And then he just says, okay, let's go back to the hotel. And she refuses and says, no, I'm staying out here a bit. And he just like, you know what? Fine. Just make sure you come back to the room, okay? And she's like, yeah, whatever. She goes off, finds the teenagers. One of the girls gives her that all-inclusive bracelet. She orders a Fanta lime or lemon, whatever she says. With it, and we then see Callum in the hotel room alone, watching the video camera back, and it's different from before. Before, it was like a happy memory, and while he might have been up all night, it felt sort of like a happy thing. He was watching back a good day. Now he's watching it, and it's the opposite. He's not happy. He's in a bad way, basically, at this point. So he closes it, and he leaves the hotel room alone. We go back to Sophie, and she's kind of lost. She runs into Michael. Michael invites her to come out with his friends. We see Callum walking down the street. Some lady throws a cigarette on the ground. He picks it up and starts smoking. Again, going back to what I said, where the only times we see him doing this is when he's sort of spiraling. So he's smoking again, obviously not a good sign. Sophie is now in like this pool with Michael. They're all alone. Michael says, I like you. Do you like me? She like brushes her hair back and is like, yeah. And they share like this
classic move.
Super awkward first kiss.
Oh, it was the worst. It was so uncomfortable to watch.
And Michael's friends are like off in the distance cheering for him, like, yeah, way to go.
Eyes open, just smushing faces.
Eyes open, smushing faces, yep. She gets back to the hotel room, can't get in, nobody's answering the door, Callum's not there. We cut back to Callum, and we see a beachfront. It's dark out, probably like midnight or something, and Callum walks on the beach and just walks straight into the water. Just dives into this dark, empty water. No one's around. And he vanishes. And all we hear, we linger, and all we're seeing is we're hearing the waves crashing. We don't see him again. We don't see him come up.
Very ominous.
Nothing. Super ominous.
Also, 10 out of 10. I would not recommend you go into the ocean at night without anybody.
Yeah, probably a good idea.
Terrible idea.
Eventually, Sophie does get led into the room by the reception desk or a guy at reception. And when she gets in there, it is revealed Callum is okay, but he's passed out on the bed, butt naked, on her bed. And she, almost in a reverse of one of the very first shots when they arrive at the hotel, is she puts blankets over him, and then the camera pans down on him while she's kind of out of focus in the background. And we hear him heavily breathing, we cut to the rave, I should say, and we see him up close dancing in the rave, and he's heavily breathing, like he's kind of, he's danced to the point of exhaustion or something, basically. Then we cut, and we get an interesting shot. We see the rug on a floor, and we see these feet come down on top of the rug, and we pan up, and we're now in the bedroom of adult Sophie with her girlfriend. Or wife, maybe. And we hear a baby crying, and Sophie says, I'll get it, and she gets up and leaves. So we finally seen Sophie in present day, basically. She has the rug. So we know, if you didn't already assume, we know at this point that Callum something has happened.
Right.
Because now she has the rug.
I did not catch that the first watch.
I don't think many people caught the rug thing.
I did not catch the rug.
Like I said, when I listened to... As soon as I got out of the theater, when I listened to this talk about the movie on my drive home, I was like, they didn't mention the rug at all. Like, at all. Like, that's a...
Yeah.
I feel like that's a big sort of moment.
That was a big moment.
So, I don't know. I just felt like that was a big sort of takeaway kind of thing. Depending on how you read into the rug, like I said earlier. Obviously, Callum put a lot of stake into it because he bought it. And now it's passed on to Sophie.
Yeah.
So we get to... we also learn at this point that it's Sophie's birthday. Now, while it's not ever specifically said what birthday of hers it is, she's an adult at this point, has a child. The assumption, my takeaway, is it's her 31st birthday.
That's what my thought was.
She's about to be the same age her father was on his birthday, which kind of brings the whole thing full circle. Like, it makes a lot more sense that she might be reflecting on the last vacation she had with him, because it was his birthday as well, and now she's the same age. So maybe she's got new insight or something to how he was feeling. At this point, we go back to the vacation. They're on a bus trip. They're leaving this time. And this is where I talked about earlier. We get the reverse shot of the scenery moving right to left, indicating they're leaving. And they stop off at this place, like a little pit stop rest area. They get out. They seem to be in a better mood because Sophie's mimicking Callum as he's doing his Tai Chi. They kind of have a cute scene where they're mimicking each other doing that. And then we go right into, they're at a mud bath.
Right.
Fun little fact is that apparently Frankie Corio thought it was gross or didn't like the mud bath thing at all. It was
so funny to me.
Yeah.
I would love to go to like some natural spring or something like that where you do like the natural mud stuff. It's so, but it's again, it's, she's really young. She probably doesn't like the idea of sloshing around in thick mud and getting it in her hair and her face and all that stuff.
So this scene has a lot of interesting dialogue in it. First, we get Callum, because this is the next day, is having a hard time letting himself off the hook for how Sophie found him naked last night. He is very apologetic to her. He keeps continuously saying sorry. And Sophie generally doesn't think it's like a big deal. She doesn't quite, she's a child. She probably doesn't quite fully wrap her head around why he would feel so sorry about it. Yeah, like, I locked you out, you found me passed out naked on the bed, whatever, but to her it's just like, you know, it happens, like, you fell asleep. She doesn't know this huge thing he went through.
Yeah.
And he's apologizing. She's just like, don't worry about it, no big deal.
Let the record show that he's asleep face down.
And
she only saw his tushy.
Yeah, she only saw his tushy, yes. The next part that's interesting is they have this talk about Cleopatra.
Yes.
Sophie recently took a class where they talked about Egypt and where they're located at, and these mud baths apparently is something that Cleopatra went and did. She's like, it's so crazy to think that Cleopatra was, you know, close by at this point. And
she was like, she was right here.
She was right here,
She was right here.
And Callum's like, oh yeah, and then a snake bit her.
Yeah.
And Sophie, interesting for the story, says, well, we don't know. They never found a snake. It might have been suicide. They think maybe it was needles. So I've, you know, everything in the script, even the most subtle thing, clearly indicates part of the story, has something to do with the story. And I feel like that is a very subtle, like, maybe this is where the story is going. And I, you know, revisiting this multiple times, I do think that's a very subtle but not so subtle indication of yes, that's what's going on.
Again, the first time that I watched this movie,
it's easy to just not even think about.
I didn't even think about it, you know. And what a fascinating thing for her to show interest in, and kind of throw out a thought that most people probably don't. Like, are you conspiracy theory on Cleopatra and, you know, whatever. But I thought that was a really, really cool scene of them kind of riffing off of that. And you're right. This is one of those movies that even something so minuscule and so tiny,
it means a lot.
It means a lot. And there was thought. If there's something that you think no thought was put into, thought was put into it. For sure.
There's even I didn't touch about this, but there's a lot of stuff where we see paragliders in the sky.
Yes.
Parasailers, whatever you call them. And those were real people just at this beach paragliding, whatever, like people on beaches do. So they don't quite have a lot of significance to the story itself, but we see them a lot. But Charlotte Wells likes to point out, she says there's a few times where just kind of B-roll footage is just the parasailers in the sky, and then there's like a reflection in a pool of them. And she says, she called it like, it almost, the parasailers, when they're on screen and there's nothing else, almost feel out of time. Like, you're not quite sure if they're happening in the 90s when the stuff we're seeing in the flashback are, or if it's something more like present day. They're kind of this moment in the film of out of time where the lines are sort of blurred to I mean, you can read into that whatever you really want with it. I don't know where you take that sort of thing to be like, it's like an out of time sort of thing when we're playing a lot with the past and the present, and then the sort of dream realm sort of thing with the rave, whatever that is really truly supposed to be. So the out of time thing is just another layer on top of that where I mean, I don't really know what to make of it, but it's a curious thing that she said.
But it is interesting when you're watching a scene and you just see them in the background just kind of floating throughout the sky like dandelions, or like just just floating around, which looks from here looks very peaceful. I bet you it's terrifying. Couldn't pay me enough money.
You would say that.
Couldn't pay me enough.
So we then get a cool little shot while they're showering off and taking off all the mud. Sophie tells him about the kiss, and Callum's like, "Oh, was he your age?" And she's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Okay, well, that's cool. Did you like it?" And she's like, "I don't know."
I love that she told him about it, and she didn't keep it to herself.
They've got this they're kind of building back to the relationship we saw at the beginning, where they're clearly very open and loving to each other. And Callum follows that up by saying, you know, when you're older, you can confide in me. You can tell me the boys you kiss, the drugs you take, anything. Like, I've done that stuff, so you can come to me. And she's like, Dad, I'm never going to do that. He's like, that's fine too. Yeah. But if you ever need, like, a confidant, you can come to me. And I want you to know that you can rely on me. And I take that as, because we heard this story about Callum when he was 11 and nobody remembering his birthday, that this is him reaching out to his daughter to try and give her something that he feels like he never had, which was somebody to listen to his problems or issues, so that she essentially doesn't end up like him.
Yeah.
I think is where he's kind of going with it.
I think that's where that goes. And I think there's also a part of us, not even like our generation, there's got to be a part of people in every generation that at some point in their life they have a thought that they want to fix something or prevent something or soften the blow of something from their kids that they received from their parents or their upbringing. Yeah. You know, I want to be there for you because they weren't there for me. Or, you know, if you want to talk about French kissing a boy, I guess I will listen to that.
Yeah.
You know, I think that that's in all of us. There's something that everyone wants to take from their childhood and try to spin it differently to make things a little bit better.
Mm-hmm. And then we get into the next scene, and this one's interesting, and I have shout out to Nacho Egg and Coastal Cinephile.
Nacho!
Shout outs to them just real quick, because we always talk about Criterion movies.
Yes.
Obviously, Nacho is basically the reason I actually pulled the trigger and started getting Criterion movies. Yeah. And then he told me that Coastal Cinephile is the reason he started getting Criterion movies. So it's kind of a domino effect. Anyway, Criterion, get them.
Get 'em.
But they're at this sort of, I don't want to say Coliseum, amphitheater type thing, like an old one, like Roman,
like
Greek maybe. Yeah. Sure. I don't know. Ottoman, whoever ruled during that time.
No idea.
Well, I say Ottoman because that's what Turkey was before. It doesn't matter. Anyway.
It's been a long time since I was in
Sophie's running around and telling all these strangers, like, help me sing my dad happy birthday. Help me sing my dad happy birthday. And as they all turn and start singing happy birthday to him, there's this shot of Callum. He's standing up on the stairs. And he's kind of got his hand over his eyes looking down. And the way the shadow is indicated, what Charlotte Wells said is that this specific shot was inspired by the Criterion Collection's cover of Beau Trovalli. I probably pronounced that wrong. I think she pronounces it slightly differently. Coastal Cinephile has this movie, and he recommended it.
Really?
He said it was a good movie. So I'm curious just off of that, because I looked up the cover. It took me a minute to figure out what movie she was talking about and look up the cover. And I see it because it's a man standing there, and his face and like half of his upper torso are covered in shadow. And that's exactly how Callum looks. But he's very clearly not happy about aging. Not necessarily that people are singing him happy birthday, but just sort of the reminder that he's now a year older with, you know, essentially nothing to show for it. We get a cut to a postcard that says, Sophie, I love you very much, Dad.
Yeah.
And Callum's crying. And it's a shot of Callum, his back to the camera, kind of hunched over on a bed, staring into this corner of this room. And it's just an extended shot of him just crying, breaking down. It's very clear that in this moment, and especially after the birthday, he feels trapped. Like he's no way out. He's basically cornered himself with all of his life choices. And you can maybe look into, is that postcard something he didn't send to her? Is that maybe like one of the last things he sent to her? Where does this stand in the actual timeline? Is it, little knickknacks that they've picked up during this trip? We haven't seen him buy any postcards. So this scene kind of also stands, going back to what Charlotte said, of being out of time. It doesn't it can play as if it's like in order, chronological, like maybe they've stopped for the night at a room and then this is him in the room, or is this after they were together and this is something he was like a postcard he meant to send and never sent, or something he is going to send her and is maybe the last correspondence they have. It's not exactly clear, so you can take it however you really want to take it, but it's very clear that he's a broken man at this point and feels trapped in his own existence.
I personally have decided to take it as he does send it, or maybe it was packed with things for her. That's what I would like to think.
After that, we go to a dinner scene. Very cute scene. They're out for dinner. At this point, Callum has basically doesn't care about spending money anymore.
No.
He doesn't ask this guy comes up to ask for their picture. He doesn't ask how much it is in pounds. He just says sure, pays for it.
We don't care no more.
Throws up the little rabbit ears above her head, and then this beautiful shot. Charlotte said that it was inspired by something, but I'm not. It's some sort of film that this shot was inspired by, but it's the camera's facing down on the table with this Polaroid that is developing as they're having this conversation. Now, the conversation itself...
And it stays on the Polaroid.
Yeah, it stays on the Polaroid. The conversation themselves, I believe, wasn't scripted, if I remember correctly. So it was just the two of them just having a conversation, like, in character, as this photograph develops. And it's a simple shot, but it's also beautiful. It definitely has captured a moment in time where, at the end of their journey, they are happy with each other to be together and stuff. So it's a beautiful little thing.
There are so many scenes in the movie that are just aesthetically pleasing, but I do remember, especially on the second watch of it, as someone that has a Polaroid camera, loves Polaroids, we own like 1 million of them.
Yes, we do.
It was so satisfying to sit there and see that that attention to detail. And again, the Polaroid thing does throw you back to what time it was and all of that. It was very, very aesthetically pleasing to see.
And then we cut to, again, they're having a fun night. They run up across the street, and all of a sudden we hear Under Pressure. David Bowie Queen is playing. And Callum drags Sophie over, and he starts to dance. And Sophie's embarrassed by it, but he's like, come on, dance with me. And she's like, no, I don't want to dance.
He wasn't a bad dancer either.
I mean, I guess.
I thought it was charming.
It is. He's like trying to lure her in. He's having a good time. But remember what I said is the only times we're seeing him smoke or dance in this movie is when he's spiraled or when he's mentally not there. Like he's not happy. And he's been spending money that the whole time we've been told that he has money issues, so he's spending money pretty recklessly, and now he's just full blown dancing. He's at this point, to me, he's already gone.
Yeah.
But we get this great sort of scene where Sophie, like his dancing and goofiness, is winning her over. We get to see her. She's kind of lovingly looking at him before actually going in to dance. We're getting a lot of cut back and forth between this and the rave, and in the rave, adult Sophie has reached Callum.
Yeah.
And parallel to each other, in the 90s, Callum has his arms around Sophie and they're dancing, and she's like very lovingly embracing him, holding on tightly in a happy moment, not knowing that this is essentially, from what we're seeing, the last time that they're going to have an embrace like this. Right. So it's very tight, very loving. And then we cut to the rave where adult Sophie is holding on to him, but not necessarily in a loving way, but
it's a little bit more aggressive.
It is aggressive. It's holding on to like the memory, to not let go. And what I noticed this fourth time in watching this film is something really small, and it might be unintentional, or maybe it is completely intentional, but in the past, young Sophie pushes Callum away, like she's done hugging him, pushes him away to keep going to dance.
Right.
And then in the rave, Callum pushes Sophie off of him to fade back into this fever dreamy rave sequence, and in the moment when he's pushing away, we see adult Sophie turn into young Sophie for a moment. So there's probably a lot you can read into there.
Oh, 1,000,000%.
But I think the two little pushes feel, the hugs, the embraces feel completely paralleled to each other, because one is a loving, happy moment, and the other's is like a desperate plea to, like, not to let go of this memory, or to cling to what you remember. And then the let go is to, like, you're pushing him away to let him do his thing, and the other one is he's pushing away from you, sort of thing. So love that little bit.
It's so deep, and it's so thought-provoking the more that you think about it. There are so many teeny tiny little ways that you could take it. Yeah. And it's just, I mean, it's heartbreaking, but at the same time, it's beautiful the way that it's done.
We then go back to something we saw at the very beginning, right before everything rewound. We're at the airport. Sophie's saying goodbye. It's a little goofy. She waves goodbye. He says, "I love you." She says, "I love you." And then it's a freeze frame. And when the frame freezes, it starts to pan. And as we pan, we rotate, and we come off of a TV screen, and we rotate a complete 180, and we see adult Sophie sitting on a couch with the video camera itself, watching back these memories. Yeah. Not particularly looking happy. Probably, it's reliving a sad moment, the last vacation she shared with her father. And then we rotate again, and we keep rotating. And this time we've gone in a 360, but now we're looking back at Callum. Mm-hmm. And Callum closes the video camera, the little preview window. He closes it, turns off the camera, kind of drops it to his side, turns around, and walks off down this corridor into these doors. And inside the doors is black with the flashing lights of the rave. Yeah. So he just walked off into the rave. Very clearly and powerfully, I think, indicating that's the last time Sophie ever saw her father. Yeah. As the movie ends, and I could have got this wrong. I was trying to find it in the credits, but it's not quite there, and I forgot to look it up before we did this. But as the credits start rolling, a song that is played, this beautiful song, is called "One Without." I hope I got that correct. Which I think is just another layer to clearly indicate that, yes, Callum has died. I personally believe it was definitely he took his own life. It's the whole film is a devastating. It's beautifully devastating in that it's this loving capture of a moment in time between a father and daughter on a vacation. It's ups, it's downs, but at the center is a woman trying to come to terms with who her father was in the last vacation they had together, that moment of time instilled in her memory. And now that she is at his age, I guess, understanding better who he was as a person. I think it's a absolutely beautiful movie.
It's a beautiful movie, and it is heart-wrenching. It's funny at times. I mean, it's funny, it's sad, it hits you, it makes you think, which I think that makes a movie so great. Yeah. If you've watched a movie and 2 days later you're still thinking about some things about it, they did something right. Mm-hmm. And it really is one of those things that the more that you watch it, the more that you appreciate it. And I'm so happy that he was nominated for that, because the performances are amazing. And,
yes.
And I think that it also is one of those things that brings awareness to mental health, to how you spend your life, what you focus on and what's important to you. That's a great movie to me.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do think it does have a powerful message in it that obviously takes place in the 90s, and we mentioned earlier, at the time, mental health wasn't something that was really talked about as widely. It does get a lot of talk now, and men's mental health also gets talked about a lot, because there's the toxic masculinity of being like, boys don't cry, suck in your feelings, whatever, which is something I deal with. That's like, I've just done that my whole life. So on a level, it is a heartbreaking depiction of mental health, a decline, a man going through a decline in his 30s, young. I mean, Callum as a character is younger than I am going through this, and it is absolutely devastating to watch this movie. But I do think everyone, if you've seen it once, you need to do yourself a favor and watch it a second time. And especially if you're listening to you've seen the movie, you're listening to this, you stumbled upon this somehow, and you've listened through all of this. I know at this point, this is probably longer than the actual movie itself, but it feels like there's so much to talk about. But go back and watch this movie for a second time, or for a third time, and maybe something we've brought up here is something you didn't think about, or like I said,
you're going to appreciate the smaller things.
The smoking and dancing. Again, on the fourth time I've watched this, it really stuck out to me that we only see that in his dark moments, not necessarily any other time. So there's a lot of things that I feel like, even if I watch this tomorrow, I bet you I'd pick up on even smaller things. The movie is, like I said, I think I called it like devastatingly beautiful.
Yeah,
it is
so devastatingly beautiful.
There's so much more to it than what you might glean from a one-time viewing. You deserve for yourself to watch it a second time. I mean, if you just outright hated the movie, then I don't know why you're here to begin with. But go back and watch it again. Maybe we've opened your eyes to something new. Maybe there was things you didn't quite pick up the first time that now you may appreciate a little bit more. Or maybe, obviously people are going to be like, well, you might get more of it if you have a father, or you have a kid, I guess is the way to say, or maybe you've had somebody in your life who
I think literally any person could relate to this movie in at least one tiny way.
I agree with that. While I do think maybe if you are a father, or a parent in general, especially a young parent, you might relate on that sort of level. But I think if you've ever felt like you didn't belong somewhere, or you've had depression or some sort of mental something, there's probably a lot in this that could hit you on an extra level. And the movie is just beautiful for doing that.
Even if you have like a silly, awkward dad.
Yeah. And it's not even... And it's... Charlotte did such a great job writing and directing this for a feature. I am incredibly impressed and look forward to anything that she does in the future.
Oh, yeah.
I will be there to watch it. And Paul Mescal he's on my radar now. Frankie Corio is on my radar now. I want to see more out of all of them.
Just the cover of it looks...
Yeah, also A24,
so cool.
This packaging for this Blu-ray is dope. So cool. And it also came with like these postcard, which are behind the scenes images, which was brilliant. Fantastic, just fantastic. A24 is great.
They did a really good job, and I definitely recommend it. You don't watch a lot of movies more than 2 times, so
call me out. That is not in such a frequency.
Okay.
And to say that I've watched this 4 times within the span of maybe like 6 months is crazy. There's not many movies that I've watched that often.
I watched
that
Jurassic
quickly.
World something, and then Glass like 4 times in a month.
Yeah, that's true.
So that says a lot, and I like that you appreciate all of the little aspects of the movie and all of the little subtle things, and you took the time to listen to the commentary and find all of these little tidbits about it. But yeah, it's great. I mean, we own it now, but I would watch it again.
Yeah. I do plan on watching it again.
Really good if you want to cry.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that comes to the end of it. We love this movie, if that wasn't abundantly clear. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thank you.
This is only our first sort of dive into this. I know it may have been a bit long-winded at times, but it just does feel like there's so much to talk about with this film. We do plan on doing a lot more of these, possibly trying to make it a weekly thing. If you've not heard of us before, I'm Patrick, and this is Maggie. We're Chicken on a Stick.
Chicken on a Stick.
We do a live show every Friday over on Twitch. You can find us on Instagram at COAS_podcast or Facebook, Chicken on a Stick. Posting things there pretty much daily. Come check us out.
Yeah.
And hopefully you come back for more episodes. Again, thank you for listening to this very long-winded discussion about Aftersun. Go watch it if you haven't watched it, but we literally spoiled the entire movie for you. But you'll maybe still enjoy it with insight you wouldn't have had otherwise. And if you've already watched it, watch it again.
If you're anything like us, you love a good movie, and this is a great movie.
Yeah. So we will be back hopefully next week with another movie to talk about.
Yeah.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.